on Oversight and Government Reform under the authority granted to it pursuant to House Rule 10. Accordingly, House Rule 10 grants the committee broad jurisdiction to conduct investigations of any matter at any time. This interview was requested by Chairman James Comer as part of the committee's investigation into President Biden's alleged mental and physical decline, the Biden White House's efforts to hide that from the American people, and any unauthorized executive actions. Can the witness please state his name and spell his last name for the record?
Ian Sams, last name is S-A-M-S.
Thank you. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank Mr. Sams for appearing here today. The committee appreciates your appearance for this interview voluntarily. My name is Mitch Benzine, and I'm the General Counsel for Chairman Comer. Under the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform's rules, you are allowed to have an attorney present to advise you during this interview. Do you have an attorney representing you in a personal capacity present with you today?
I do.
Will counsel please identify themselves for the record?
David O'Neill.
Alicia O'Brien.
For the record, starting with the rest of the majority staff, can the additional staff members please introduce themselves with their name, title, and affiliation?
Peter Spector, professional staff member with the majority.
Margaret Harker, Senior Advisor with the majority.
Jessica Collins with the majority.
James Russ, Deputy Staff Director with the majority.
Will Harness, Staff Assistant for the majority.
Ellison Tolman, Counsel for the majority.
And Mr. Chairman.
James Comer, Chairman, House Oversight Committee.
Mr. Sams, before we begin, I would like to go over the ground rules for this interview. The questioning will proceed in rounds. The majority will ask questions for an hour, and then the minority will have an opportunity to ask questions for an hour if they choose. To the extent members have questions for the witness, they will be propounded during their side's respective rounds. The clock will stop if the witness needs to confer with counsel, when counsel for the witness is speaking, and when members are speaking during the opposing side's round of questions. We will alternate back and forth until there are no more questions. Do you understand?
I do.
There is a court reporter taking down everything I say and everything you say to make a written record of the interview. For the record to be clear, please wait until the staffer questioning you finishes each question before you begin your answer, and the staffer will wait until you finish your response before proceeding to the next question. To ensure the court reporter can properly record this interview, please speak clearly, concisely, and slowly. The court reporter cannot record nonverbal answers such as nodding or shaking your head, so it is important that you answer each question with an audible verbal answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Exhibits may be entered into the record. Majority exhibits will be identified numerically. Minority exhibits will be identified alphabetically. Do you understand?
I do.
We want you to answer our questions in the most complete and truthful manner possible, so we will take our time. If you have any questions or do not fully understand the question, please let us know. We will attempt to clarify, add context to, or rephrase our questions. If we ask about specific conversations or events in the past that you are unable to recall the exact words or details, you should testify to the substance of those conversations or events to the best of your recollection. If you recall only a part of a conversation or event, you should give us your best recollection of those events or parts of conversations that you do recall. Do you understand?
I do.
You are required by law to answer questions from Congress truthfully. This also applies to questions posed by congressional staff in this interview. Do you understand?
Yes.
If at any time you knowingly make false statements, you could be subject to criminal prosecution. Do you understand?
Yes.
This includes both knowingly providing false testimony, but also stating that you do not recall or remember something when in fact you do. Do you understand?
Yes.
Furthermore, you cannot tell half-truths or exclude information necessary to make statements accurate. You are required to provide all information that would make your response truthful. A deliberate failure to disclose information can constitute a false statement. Do you understand?
I do.
Is there any reason you're unable to provide truthful testimony in today's interview?
No.
Please note that if you wish to assert a privilege over any statement today, that assertion must comply with the rules of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Pursuant to that, Committee Rule 16C1 states, for the chair to consider assertions of privilege over testimony or statements, witnesses or entities must clearly state the specific privilege being asserted and the reason for the assertion on or before the scheduled date of testimony or appearance. Do you understand?
Yeah.
I would like to enter as Exhibit 1 a letter transmitted this morning to your counsel dated August 21st, 2025 for Mr. Gary Lukowski, Deputy Counsel to the President. This letter informs you that President Trump has determined not to assert executive privilege over your assessment of former President Biden's fitness for office of the President and your knowledge of who exercised executive powers during his administration. This letter also states that President Trump will not assert immunity to preclude you from testifying before the House Oversight Committee. Ordinarily, we take a 5-minute break at the end of each hour of questioning, but if you need a longer break or a break before that, please let us know and we will be happy to accommodate. However, to the extent that there is a pending question, we would ask that you finish answering the question before we take the break. Do you understand?
Yep.
Do you have any further questions before we begin?
I don't.
My clock says 9:13 and we will begin our hour. Thank you again for being here voluntarily. It's certainly appreciated. I want to start very, very briefly with education and your career. Where did you attend undergrad and when did you graduate?
I went to the University of Alabama and I graduated in 2011.
And with what degree?
It's a Bachelor of Arts degree,
In any specific?
political science, and
Thank you.
communications, double major.
Thank you. And then very briefly, can you go just through your positions and offices prior to joining the Biden administration in 2021?
Sure. I first worked on Capitol Hill, actually, worked in the United States Senate for Senator Tom Carper of Delaware. I worked at the Democratic National Committee after that. I worked for Secretary Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign through the 2016 general election. Following that, I worked for former Congressman Tom Perriello in Virginia, his primary campaign for governor in 2017. And then after that, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia's re-election campaign in 2018. And then following that, in 2019, I was the press secretary for then Senator Kamala Harris's primary campaign for president. Following that, I was a consultant during 2020. And then after President Biden won in 2020, I worked at the Department of Health and Human Services during 2021 and into the beginning of 2022 on the COVID response team before coming over to the White House, where I worked in the White House counsel's office as a spokesman.
And that was May 2022 through August 2024?
That's correct.
And after August 2024, you left to go back to the newfound Kamala Harris for president campaign?
Yes, I was a senior spokesperson on Vice President Harris's presidential campaign.
And then what is your current role?
I'm an independent consultant.
Thank you. Get into kind of why we're here today. During your time at the White House, so 2022 to 2024, did anyone ever direct you to lie on behalf of President Biden?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did you ever lie on behalf of President Biden?
No, not that I know of or that I can recall.
When was the first time you met President Biden?
The first time I met President Biden personally was in a meeting maybe early 2024. I think it was early 2024.
About 18 months into your stint in the counsel's office, is that?
I think that that's right. To the best of my knowledge, I know I only interacted with him on limited occasions, and I believe the first meeting that I was in with him was early 2024.
And then how often would you say that you interacted with the president in person?
I interacted with him pretty infrequently. I think just to take a step back, if I can describe the role that I had, I was a spokesman for the White House. Generally speaking, that meant dealing with reporters, handling media inquiries, communication strategy on issues that were in my portfolio. The way that would work is oftentimes I had an external facing role. And so, it was not unusual that I would have, fairly infrequent interactions with the president himself.
So weekly, monthly, what are we talking about?
Very infrequent. I think I met with the president a handful of times during my tenure in the White House.
And have you ever traveled on Marine One with the president?
No.
What about Air Force One with the president?
No.
Have you ever traveled with the president?
No.
Been to the president's Wilmington house?
No.
Been to the president's Rehoboth house?
No.
And there was a daily 8 a.m. staff meeting in the White House. Did you attend that meeting?
I don't think so. I'd be curious more information on which meeting that was. I was in a number of meetings, but I don't.
It's been described as the very, very senior staff meeting.
No, I would not have been in that.
And then there was a larger senior staff meeting after that one concluded around 8:40. Would you go to that one?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. I want to introduce Exhibit 2. As it's being passed around, it's a
Thank you.
tweet from Alex Thompson at Axios summarizing, pulled a couple quotes of a interview you did on MSNBC, and one of the quotes says, "When I deal with him, he is sharp," him being President Biden, and he is asking tough questions. Do you recall this interview specifically?
I do.
I mean, you said that you met him personally maybe a handful of times. Are those the interactions that you were discussing when you say I deal with him?
Yes.
So this statement, the basis for this statement was your interactions somewhere between 1 and 5 times.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that's a bit misleading?
I think it was pretty direct and honest, and said that when I do deal with him, he's sharp, and he was asking incisive questions during my meetings with him.
But you dealt with him 5 times in 24 months. That's not exactly a large scope of knowledge on how he interacts with staff.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my experience. I'm happy to share about my experience in the White House and my role and my job, and then participate in this interview about that. I, can speak to my own experience with him, and that reflects my experience with him.
You don't think it's missing some context?
I don't.
Do you think that statement suggests that you deal with him more than you did?
I don't think so. I mean, I spoke about my own interactions with him.
Okay. Do you believe President Biden was in mental or cognitive decline while acting as President of the United States?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did you notice signs of President Biden aging while he was in the White House?
Well, he was certainly an older man, and yes, time does not stop, and so I definitely noticed him aging, like most presidents have before him.
What did you notice?
Just that he was getting older. I mean,
Stiffer gait. Did you notice a stiffer gait?
I didn't associate, that with a specific causation. Obviously, I know that there's media coverage around that as an issue. He was getting older. He was an older person anyway, and so, I'm not a medical professional to assess sort of how those things may interact with aging.
Did you notice him misremembering words more often?
I didn't. I mean, my own personal experience with him, like I mentioned in the meetings that I had with him, he seemed very well prepared on the issues that we were discussing. He asked tough questions of us, thoughtful questions of the circumstances. I had no reason to think that he was anything other than capable of being the president and executing his duties.
What were the interactions that you had with him? You said a couple meetings. What were the topics of those meetings, if you can remember?
Sure. I had a meeting with him with some other colleagues about a congressional interview with his son, Hunter Biden. I had a meeting with him about the public testimony before this committee, I believe it was with Special Counsel Robert Hur.
Judiciary.
A Judiciary Committee, sorry. About Special Counsel Robert Hur and his public testimony. I had a meeting with him about, which I believe is around the time of this exhibit that you put in front of me, about the Supreme Court's immunity decision that came down and his speech about that to the nation. Generally speaking, those are the issues that I recall meeting with him about.
Okay. I'm going to work backwards, forwards
Sure.
on this means. In addition, the understanding the general topic of the Supreme Court's immunity decision was the topic of that meeting. Did anything else come up?
It was the meeting, as I recall, it was about the Supreme Court immunity decision that had just come down and his desire to come back to Washington to give a speech about it, and kind of how that was going to go and when he was going to speak and where and those sorts of things.
And then the meeting regarding Special Counsel Hur, you said was regarding his testimony before Congress, which I believe is a Judiciary Committee, but hopefully I'm not wrong. And did you meet with him about the Hur report at all, or was it specific to the Special Counsel's testimony?
The meeting that I recall was about the testimony when he was publicly testifying before Congress about his report and his investigation.
Do you recall the contents of that discussion that you had?
Yeah, my role in that meeting was to sort of, how's the press coverage? Who's covering it? What are people focusing on from what he said? Which members, are asking questions or involved? Those were the kinds of things that we talked about. It was a pretty brief meeting.
Do you recall who else was in that meeting?
I'll do my best to try to remember exactly. I know the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, was in that meeting. The White House Counsel, Ed Siskel, was in that meeting.
Was Richard Sauber?
I don't believe Mr. Sauber was in that meeting.
Was Bob Bauer?
I don't believe Bob Bauer was in that meeting. To the best of my recollection, he was not in that meeting.
And then you said that you called another meeting about Hunter Biden, his deposition or transcribed interview before this committee.
That's correct.
Do you recall the contents of that conversation?
Yeah, it was similar. It was sort of, what's the press coverage around the interview? What are people saying? Whether that's, members who had gone out and spoke to the cameras from both sides, whether that's chairman, ranking member, whoever was there. I don't remember which members were present. Sort of how it's playing in the press, that kind of thing.
And do you recall who was in that meeting? I guess other than you and the president?
Yeah, I'll do my best to recall. I believe the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, was in that meeting. I believe the Steve Ricchetti was in that meeting. And I believe Ben LeBolt, who was the communications director, was in that meeting.
Was Hunter Biden in that meeting?
No, he was here.
It was while he was testifying?
It was the day of his interview with you all.
Was Hunter Biden in the meeting regarding special counsel Hur's testimony?
No.
Was he in the meeting regarding the immunity decision?
He was, my understanding was the president was at Camp David with his family, and I believe Hunter was there with him at Camp David.
What did the president say regarding his son's testimony before this committee?
I don't recall him saying much during that meeting. I think, I remember him asking me which members were speaking publicly about it. But that's all I can recall him asking or saying.
Did he express frustration regarding the testimony?
No.
Were you a part of any conversations about whether or not Mr. Biden would testify before this committee?
Hunter Biden?
Mm-hmm.
No.
And then I believe the immunity conversation was virtual, as you said, the president was in Camp David. Were the other two in person?
Yes.
Right. Shifting back a little bit. During your time in the White House, did you ever receive any outreach, phone calls, anything from people outside the White House concerned about President Biden's health?
No, not that I can recall.
What about concerns from any other White House staff?
No.
Did you ever shift to the political side for President Biden's re-election campaign?
I did not.
Did you pay attention to the polling at all in that campaign?
Only what was publicly reported. I didn't have access to any proprietary polling from the campaign or anything.
Do you recall any discussions during the campaign about voters' perspective on the president's age and ability to be president?
Certainly, I know that was a public issue in the campaign. Yes.
Were you a part of any of the conversations on combating that perception?
No. Again, I think just important. I was in the White House in the counsel's office, and I think being in the counsel's office, keenly aware of the lines. So I was not involved in the president's campaign decision-making, dealing with these issues as part of the campaign context.
Thank you. I'm gonna shift forward a little bit. There's been a number number of books written about the last year of the Biden administration. Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson wrote one, Chris Whipple wrote one, Josh Dawson, Tyler Pager, and Isaac Armstrong wrote one. Were you interviewed by either Mr. Tapper or Mr. Thompson for their book?
No, I was not.
Do you know anyone who was?
I'm sure I do. I don't know of anybody specifically that I can
No one
recall
came to you
having.
and said, I just had drinks with Jake Tapper?
I had one friend who said that he had talked to them for their book.
Who was that?
That was Rob Flaherty, who had been the digital director in the White House and
And
on the campaign.
And then went to the Harris campaign.
He was on the Biden campaign,
Okay.
and then when the candidate switch happened, he was on the Harris campaign.
Were there any discussions that you were a part of within the White House regarding the upcoming books prior to President Biden leaving office?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Any discussions that you were a part of within the White House about the books?
No.
Did you ever hear anyone say, Jake Tapper's writing a book?
Not that I recall from during my time in office. I'm not even sure when that book was announced.
I think that they began doing interviews while the president was still in office, and I think some staff interviewed with Mr. Tapper or Mr. Thompson while in office, so I was just wondering if you were a part of any of those.
No.
What about Mr. Whipple? Were you interviewed for his book?
No.
Do you know anyone that was?
I'm sure I do, but I don't recall. I don't know. I don't have knowledge of individuals who sat and talked with him.
What about Mr. Dossie, Mr. Pager, or Mr. Armstrong? Did any of them interview you for their book?
Yes.
Which one?
Pager.
Do you recall what you told Mr. Pager? Or first, when the discussion took place?
I don't recall when the first kind of conversation took place. Generally speaking, they fact-checked their book, for example, and if someone was mentioned, my understanding was, at least what they said to me, was that they contacted everyone who had been mentioned in their book, basically, to tell them what was going to be in the book. So we had conversations like that. I don't remember, much of what we talked about. It's been a long time ago.
Was it mostly them telling you what your mentions were and then you corroborating or disputing that?
There was definitely that. I recall clearly having a conversation with Tyler about that.
Did they get anything wrong?
Not that I know of. I actually haven't read the book, but I don't. What he told me in the conversation was accurately reflected.
And then have you spoken to Corinne Jean-Pierre about her book?
No.
Have you spoken to anyone else about her book in the White House realm?
What do you mean?
Like, have you called up Ben LeBolt to say, why is Corinne writing a book?
No.
Going back a little deeper into your experience within the administration. So you said that you started in February 2021 at HHS, correct?
Correct.
And you were one of the Deputy Assistant Secretaries for Public Affairs.
Yes.
Primary portfolio was COVID response.
Yes.
Who hired you for this role?
That's a good question. It was during the transition. I'd done interviews with the transition team. I actually don't even recall exactly the individuals. But my understanding of how the transition sort of worked was, they had a team of people who were vetting candidates, interviewing candidates to hire them and place them within agencies. I had done work in 2020 during kind of the main part of the pandemic on polling and messaging around COVID. And that's kind of how I got, familiar with the issue and I think how I was identified as someone who might want to work on the COVID response.
But the hiring took place during the transition, not after inauguration. Like the hiring process, obviously you
Correct.
joined after the inauguration.
Correct.
Was your office in the Humphrey building?
It was. We were largely remote most of the time that I worked there. And so but I did have an office in the Humphrey building, yes.
It's a blessing. The Humphrey building
That is correct.
isn't renowned for being nice.
It is in need of some upgrades, I would say. Hopefully Secretary Kennedy can do that.
What were your kind of primary duties in that role?
It was a very challenging job, obviously in the middle of the pandemic. My primary responsibilities in that role were to work on public messaging around the administration's COVID response efforts, vaccination, testing, CDC decision-making, FDA decision-making, help handle both press, media inquiries and stories about our response to the pandemic and the administration's work, or advising, working with officials within the department, about how to communicate, doing interviews, public messaging, rollouts of various actions that the administration was taking, working on the public communications around those.
What was your level of access to, say, the secretary and deputy secretary in that role?
Very frequent and common.
What about the assistant secretary for public affairs? I guess that would be your direct report, kind of.
Yes, daily interaction.
What about the COVID response team? So Mr. Zients and others.
Yeah, frequent interaction with them.
If your counsels will allow me to ask this question, it's just personal intrigue. COVID come from a lab?
Excuse me?
Did COVID come from a lab?
Oh man, I have no idea. That's entirely possible, but I think we may never know.
That's fair. And then you discussed shifting into the White House counsel's office around May of 2022. Who approached you for that role?
That would have been the then White House counsel, Dana Remus.
Do you know why they approached you for that role?
My understanding was that they were looking to add support and capacity to the existent White House counsel's office oversight team, and as part of that, they were looking for a communications press person and reached out to me.
It was May 2022, so not real close to the shifting of the Congress, but was that part of it too, the potential Republican majority in 2023?
Yeah, there was a sense that, if historical trends continued, that the House at least, if not House and Senate, would be controlled by Republicans, and there would just be an uptick in oversight activity.
And a feeling to be more public-facing and combating that activity. Is that
in responding to sort of the various investigations and actions, sure.
You went through your duties a little bit in that. Did you report directly to the White House counsel?
Yes.
Did your reporting structure ever change when Mr. Siskel came in? Did you still report directly to the White House counsel?
Yes.
And if you don't know these, just say that you don't know. What was your understanding of getting approval from President Biden on any decisions on the process?
Sure. It might be best to just give an example. On a statement about something, whether that would be, let's say, the special counsel investigation. A draft would be done among the legal comms team, and once kind of at the staff level, you would agree on sort of this is like what we want to do. If it was in the president's name, it would typically, my understanding is it would go to the president for him to review, have an opportunity to make edits, suggestions. I don't want to say that, I want to say this. I'm sure similar to the way staff would do with the chairman, and change things or edit things based on his review, or he would give sign off that he was good with doing it.
Did you ever write a memo that went into the decision book?
I don't recall ever writing a decision memo.
Did you ever kind of observe the president reviewing the decision book?
No.
What about, our understanding is there's kind of decision memos and decision cards. And did you ever see him review a decision card?
No.
Did you ever hand a memo or the book to the president, a decision memo or the decision book to the president directly?
No.
Did you ever witness President Biden orally authorize any executive decisions, approve statements, anything like that, verbally?
I actually think, thinking back about this, during one of those aforementioned meetings with the president where we talked about her or Hunter, I can't remember which of those, I stayed there and there was a second part of the meeting where he reviewed, I want to say it was like a nominations list, and he said, yes, you know, to the folks who were sitting there. But I wasn't a part of whatever that was, that decision that was being made. I just remember sitting there, seeing him review a nominations list or something and approving nominees.
In that case, the decisions weren't related to the meeting the first meeting that you were a part of her, or?
Correct. It was like if you have an agenda for a meeting, one thing on the agenda was, say, Robert Herr's testimony, and then maybe the next part of the agenda was, nominations, approvals, or something, where they would, combine topics into one group meeting with the president.
Were you part of any conversations regarding pardons or clemency decisions?
No.
Do you recall what the pardon process was while you were there?
With specificity, no, I was not involved in the pardon decision-making process. Generally, I believe that there was a process where, either the Justice Department or the White House Counsel's Office or some combination of them working together would come up with, recommendations that would then go to the president. But I wasn't involved in the pardon process.
If the pardon was going to be newsworthy, would they loop you in at the back end to provide a statement or anything like that?
During my time in the White House, I don't recall being involved in any pardon communications. This actually might be helpful. The White House press office is its own entity within the White House. I was part of the White House counsel's office. A lot of times, even if it was an issue or topic or portfolio, something that someone in the counsel's office, depending on what it was, it might actually be handled by someone comms press-wise from the press office as opposed to me. So I don't, for example, I know that during my tenure, I think there was a large pardon package around, or commutation or clemency package around nonviolent marijuana, convicts, people who have been convicted of nonviolent marijuana offenses. That happened. I was not a part of that communications process at all. So generally speaking, I was not a part of the pardon process.
What was your level of interaction with the kind of formal press office in the White House?
Very regular, let's say daily interaction of some kind with them.
With who? Who would be your primary point of contact?
Karine, others, it depends, maybe deputy press secretaries, to say, oh, so-and-so reached out about such and such a story that they're working on, I'm dealing with them, I'm working with, this person on this thing, that kind of thing. Or with Karine, it would be, if some of the issues in my portfolio could come up in her daily press briefing, talking to her about those.
Did your interaction with the press office become more frequent at any point around Special Counsel Herr's report, for instance?
Yeah, it was circumstantial like that, where if there was a major news development within my portfolio, I may talk to them or be, meeting with them or talking to them about what's happening more often.
You had left the White House by this time, but did you have any conversations with anyone still there regarding the president's pardon of his son, Hunter?
No, I was not part of the discussion there.
And then, did you have any role in getting authorization or approval for the use of Autopen on any decisions?
No.
Do you know what the process was?
On how the Autopen was used,
Mm-hmm.
I have no knowledge of the Autopen and how that was used. Can I actually correct one thing, I think? Because your question. I was not involved in the decision to pardon Hunter Biden. I did not know about it. I wasn't working in the White House, as mentioned. During my time there, it was my understanding that the president had decided, and he's spoken publicly in interviews about this, not to pardon him. So I was part of conversations to say, he said he's not going to pardon him. that kind of thing. I just want to make sure I was clear
Yeah,
about that.
is that the extent of those conversations? Were you involved at all in kind of the back and forth on whether or not to prior to him making that public statement?
No. My involvement was that my understanding was the president had made a decision that he was not going to do so, and I would handle press inquiries, because we would receive press inquiries. Will the president pardon him? Will he commute the sentence? Things like that. And it was my understanding the president had said, no, I won't. And I reflected those publicly. So I just want to be clear about that.
And after he eventually did, you didn't pick up the phone and call anyone in the White House and say, what's going on?
No.
Did you have any frequent or standing meetings with the First Lady?
No.
Did you have any meetings with the First Lady?
No, I only ever saw her socially around the White House.
What about with anyone on her staff, specifically Anthony Bernal?
Yes, I've interacted with him from time to time, not regularly.
Do you recall any specific meetings with him on specific topics?
Meetings? No.
Phone calls?
Just a general, he may be one of the staff who I would update if there was press coverage around, say, for example, Hunter Biden's testimony on the Hill.
Was Mr. Bernal in that meeting about his testimony?
No.
Do you recall anything Mr. Bernal said about Mr. Hunter Biden's testimony on the Hill?
No.
In a couple of the books, they use various kind of colloquial terms for senior White House staff, like Politburo or poobahs. Did you ever hear any of those terms while at the White House?
I did not.
Any other shorthand terms to describe the kind of inner circle of advisors?
No, not that I have any knowledge of.
Did you have, it's our understanding that the White House badges, in addition to having color codes, could have residence access on them. Did you have one of those badges?
I do not think so.
Did you ever go to a meeting in the residence?
No.
I'm gonna shift back and a little bit and ask some broad questions just to kind of like lay the scope going forward so I don't ask dumb questions later. As a baseline question, did you discuss this interview today with anyone besides your counsel or family?
No. Maybe I had friends who saw that it was happening and said, good luck, or how do you feel?
Didn't discuss it with any former White House staff?
I have not discussed the substance of this interview with anyone besides these two.
It's a broad question, but yes or no for now, and we can, the best of your recollection for now, and we can dive into details, but we'll do from 2022 to 2024 when you were in the counsel's office, any discussions regarding the president's health, age, or ability to be president. I'm going to list off some people.
Okay.
And just yes or no, and we can dive in. Hunter Biden,
No.
Ashley Biden,
No.
Naomi Biden,
No.
Valerie Biden Owens.
No.
For this one, I want to expand to up until the election, Vice President Harris.
No.
Second Gentleman Emhoff,
No.
Annie Tomasini,
No.
Jeff Zients,
I don't recall having conversations with Jeff about the president's fitness or capacities.
Jake Sullivan,
No.
Anita Dunn,
Similarly, I don't recall having any sort of explicit conversations about the age of fitness question. It's possible that, we could have, talked about his age, people really are focused on his age, or there's all this press coverage of his age, things like that. But nothing, I didn't have any substantive conversations about his health or fitness or anything like that with her.
Going back to Zients for just a minute, just so I'll be extra specific. Any conversations with Mr. Zients regarding the memory lines in the special counsel report?
It's possible during group meetings, about the special counsel report that issue was discussed. I mean, it's possible.
And then same for Ms. Dunn,
Yes.
same answer.
Yeah, I would say the same thing.
Any conversations with Mr. Donlin?
Limited. Sorry, this is the original question.
The original question.
I never talked with Mike about the president's fitness or capacities.
What about the special counsel's report?
A similar answer to Jeff and Anita. He may have been in a meeting or a conversation about generally responding to her report.
I'll split up when I need to split up, but the first question, health, ability to be president. Mr. Sauber,
No.
for him, any conversations regarding the special counsel's report?
Yes.
Mr. Siskel,
Yes. Similarly to the same answer to Sauber.
no on overarching, but yes on special counsel.
Correct.
Bruce Reed,
No.
Steve Ricchetti,
No, I don't think so.
anything regarding the special counsel?
Again, it's possible that he might have been in some conversation that I was also a part of about the special counsel report. I don't recall any specific conversations with him about that though.
Miss O'Malley Dillon,
No.
Miss Ashley Williams,
No.
Mr. Bernal,
No.
Miss Tandon,
No.
Dr. O'Connor.
No.
Did you have any conversations with Dr. O'Connor regarding the president's annual physical?
It's possible that I would have been, on email traffic or something about like, here's the press release or here's the, letter that's gonna go out or something like that. But I never talked with him about the substance, for example, of the physical or, his reports or whatever.
Were you involved at all in editing or drafting his letter that was released?
No.
Any conversations with Dr. O'Connor regarding a cognitive exam?
No.
Any conversations with anyone regarding a cognitive exam?
No, certainly not that I can recall.
Ms. Jean-Pierre, any conversations regarding the president's health or ability to be president?
No.
Just for clarity, outside of potentially being on the email that Dr. O'Connor would send around with his letter, is that fair? That she would probably be on that email too?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, just to kind of generally, as one of the top spokespeople, comms people, if there were email chains about an inquiry or about, a rollout or like when the press office would be putting out the physical or something like that, it's of course possible that I'm on like traffic like that. But in terms of having a substantive conversation, about that and that issue, it's not my portfolio.
Any conversations with her regarding special counsel, meaning Ms. Jean-Pierre?
Oh, yeah, I mean, conversations with her about the report for sure.
And then in your role, did you ever have direct conversations with any sitting senator or member of the House?
During my time in the office, I certainly interacted with members of Congress, yes.
Do you recall who?
Primarily Democratic members, but members of the House, being part of group conversations and things like that. Yes, I mean, I Congressman Raskin or Congressman Nadler or other members of relevant committees for my portfolio.
I'm gonna shift back again to Hunter Biden just a little bit. Did you ever have any discussions with Abby Lowell or any of other Hunter Biden's lawyers?
Yeah, I did meet. I have met with her and talked to Abby Lowell. Yes.
Do you recall the contents of those conversations?
It was only a couple of times, not frequent. Generally speaking, Hunter's had his own personal counsel, as you know, and something that I would probably my most frequent interaction would be to tell White House reporters that has nothing to do with the president. That's a Hunter Biden question. Go talk to Hunter Biden's representatives, or to refer, press inquiries to Hunter Biden's lawyer. So that would be my most frequent interaction with him.
Were you a part of any conversations regarding Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden's legal strategy?
Maybe one or two just to hear sort of what they were doing. I was not a part of, his legal decision-making at all.
This committee had a hearing that he just kind of showed up to. Were you a part of any conversations regarding that?
No, I did not know about that until he showed up.
Were you involved in any discussions surrounding his criminal investigation, such as whether or not the president should go to his trial?
I wasn't a part of any substantive decision-making about whether the president should go to his trial.
It would be more informed of what was happening so that you could inform the press. Is that fair?
I certainly was monitoring the press coverage around it and, being aware of what was happening, and certainly had, discussions with colleagues, at the staff level about what the press coverage was, which reporters were there, things like that.
But not necessarily part of any of the substantive kind of decision-making conversations.
No, I was not part of those.
What about involvement in any discussions regarding this committee's investigation of Hunter outside of him testifying? So I'll be specific.
Yeah, please, thank you.
The committee subpoenaed the Department of Justice for the special counsel, her audio tape. Do you recall that subpoena?
Yes.
Were there conversations within the White House regarding that subpoena?
Yes.
DOJ refused to produce it. Did the White House instruct them not to produce it?
To my knowledge, no.
Were you aware that they were going to refuse that subpoena?
I don't remember exactly whether I was aware in advance or whether it was, the DOJ, Merrick Garland made a decision not to, and that was when I found out about it. I can't recall exactly when, but certainly was aware of that.
But you don't recall a specific instruction from the White House counsel's office to not comply?
No.
Similarly, the committee subpoenaed Ms. Tomasini. Do you recall that subpoena?
For this,
No. Subpoenaed her for a deposition, I believe, I thought we did.
during my time in the White House.
Yes.
I think I would have recalled or would have known that happened at the time. I don't remember that happening now, but.
What about Ms. Williams or Mr. Bernal? I believe this committee subpoenaed both of them as well.
I would have been aware of that at the time.
I don't recall them testifying. Were you aware of any conversations about not complying with those subpoenas?
Yeah, my understanding was legal determinations had been made that it was inappropriate for them to do so before other steps of the accommodations process with Congress had transpired. And so, when those decisions would be made, by the lawyers, I certainly was aware of them and knew of them and, handled media around those or press responses around those or public communications around those.
But not involved with the substantive discussion of whether or not to comply.
I think that I certainly would have been in conversations around how to respond to a letter or a subpoena like that. I certainly am not a legal expert on the legal decision-making around that. But I certainly know of, the arguments that there was, an insufficient level of, accommodations or whatever in that process to have happened before they did that.
Did you give any advice on whether or not to comply with those subpoenas?
Certainly not legal advice that I am aware of, that I've made recommendations around that.
We're short of an hour, but that's a good stopping point, so we'll go off the record and take a break.
Okay.
Time is 10:09 and we'll start our questioning. Good morning, Mr. Sams. Do you have a statement that you'd like to make for the record?
Yeah, I actually do, if that's okay. I served in the White House as a spokesman for the White House Counsel's Office from spring 2022 through August 2024. In this role, I worked on communications and media strategy, responded to reporter inquiries, managed press stories, and advised on messaging related to my portfolio. My job was to publicly express the views and positions of the President and the White House. I'm appearing today voluntarily for a transcribed interview in response to a June 27th letter from Chairman Comer focused on President Biden's health and abilities during his time in office. I'm here to answer your questions regarding my time in the White House. While President Biden was obviously an older man who aged during his time in office, nothing in my experience at the White House or in my interactions with the president indicated that he was anything other than able to execute the duties of his office. And I was proud to work for a president who accomplished a great deal for the American people.
Thank you. In the previous round, my majority colleagues asked you about the interactions that you've had with President Biden, and you described a few times that you were in meetings with the president about some topics, including congressional testimony and the Supreme Court decision around immunity, which are pretty complex and nuanced topics. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Are those the types of topics, in your opinion, that you would discuss with someone who is cognitively impaired?
I don't think so.
Did you get the impression in those meetings that anyone else in the meeting was interacting with the president as if they believed that he was cognitively impaired?
No.
I also understand from your testimony in the last hour that you did not operate the Autopen, so I ask for your indulgence as I walk through a few questions about the Autopen. To your knowledge, are you aware of any instance where an executive order was issued during Mr. Biden's presidency that was signed by an Autopen without his knowledge or authorization?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware of any instance in which the Autopen was used to sign a presidential memorandum without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
No.
Are you aware of any instance in which the Autopen was used to sign a pardon without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
No.
And are you aware of any instance in which the Autopen was used to sign an order granting clemency without President Biden's knowledge or authorization?
No.
Thanks. And just I wanted to build on what my colleague Anya said. In the interest of making sure we have a clear record, Mr. Sands, you have no knowledge that Joe Biden was at any point in time mentally unable to execute the duties of his office of president, correct?
That's correct.
And are you aware of anyone in the White House at any point during Joe Biden's presidency ever making decisions to issue any form of clemency, pardons, or otherwise in Joe Biden's name without his knowledge or authorization?
No.
Did you ever make decisions to issue any form of clemency, pardons, or otherwise in Joe Biden's name without his knowledge or authorization?
No.
And again, at any point during the Biden presidency, were you aware of anyone in the White House ever issuing any type of executive order without Joe Biden's knowledge or authorization at any point during the presidency?
No.
So to your knowledge, all decisions to issue executive orders or any pardons during the Biden administration were made by Joe Biden alone?
Yes.
And apart from any instances in which President Biden delegated authority to Vice President Harris while he was undergoing a medical procedure, were you aware of anyone ever stepping in to carry out the duties of the presidency in Joe Biden's place because he was unable to do so?
No.
Thank you.
I think we can go off the record.
I ask a couple follow-up questions. You were just asked a number of questions of whether or not you were aware that President Biden made any executive decisions without approval or staff made any executive decisions without the president's authorization or approval. That you recall those questions being asked?
Yes.
And you said that you were not aware of any. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's kind of literally not aware of any, right? Because you wouldn't have been in the room.
I'm not aware of any decisions that were made in the president's name that were not made by the president.
But you wouldn't actually have direct knowledge of that.
Well, you referenced it in our questions last hour. My understanding is that there was a process by which he would make decisions through decision memos, things like that. I mentioned in one meeting that I can recall watching him go through and make decisions about, I believe they were nominees. And so my understanding was there was a process that was in place that would, allow the president to make expedient decisions about things before his desk. And that was just my understanding of how it worked.
Did you ever receive any decision memos back with his initials or signature on them?
No.
And you never personally presented any decision memos to the president?
No.
All right, so it's actually that you were just not aware of any decisions. It's not that no unauthorized decisions took place.
I wasn't aware of any, and that was not my understanding of the process.
I want to go back. I think it was Exhibit 2. Yes. What was the process for approval for tweets that came from your official handle?
Generally speaking, I was empowered to make tweets as a spokesperson as part of my duties without having some sort of bureaucratic approval process. Depending on the topic, there may be, I may have run something by someone or had a conversation. I think I'm going to say this, but there was not a set approval process for my tweets.
The White House counsel wouldn't put eyes on your tweets?
If there was a topic that was super sensitive that needed, review, he may look at something, but generally speaking, there was not a process.
What about, would they go through the official press office?
No.
What about official statements from you? Same kind of thing, you could put out a statement on your own?
Official statements were a little bit different. Those were typically, I would draft a statement or a response to a reporter inquiry or something on the record, and I would typically email those around to folks, including the White House counsel, for their review before I would put those out.
And that would have a more formal approval process that...
Generally speaking, yes.
Were there any statements that you could put out without going through that approval process?
Yes, in that as a public spokesman for the president, if I was doing an interview or if I was gaggling or briefing reporters in person, obviously I'm speaking and I wouldn't, run my words before I would say them. So I think generally speaking, when you are hired at the White House at a senior level as a spokesperson, you are given a certain amount of autonomy to speak on behalf of the president. Obviously, you would make sure that what you were saying was in alignment with the president's views, decisions, policies, etc. But just as a matter of course, typically senior spokespeople don't always have to run everything they say by some formal approval process.
How would you prepare for on-camera interviews or embargoed press calls, any kind of off-the-cuff speaking engagement?
It depends. Sometimes I didn't really do formal preparation. I would just go talk and respond to people's questions. Sometimes if it was a more complex issue or something very, visible, I might, ensure that the White House counsel or other advisors to the president, knew what I was going to do or saw sort of draft talking point Q&A type material that I would use as sort of a baseline for what I would do.
Are there topics in particular that you would want that extra layer of visibility on?
Yeah, well, something we discussed in the interview is the special counsel Robert Hur's report, for example. That would be something where I would have ensured that everything I was saying was in alignment with, the president's views, the legal back and forth and assessments of that case, and would involve, discussions among a larger group of people.
And then you said that it was your job to make sure your statements were consistent with the president's position and policies. How did you know the president's position and policies?
I think when you work there, you sort of know, and whether the president's making decisions that he's communicating to his aides, senior aides, policy decisions that have been made, announcements that have been made, or that were going to be made. Typically there's a process there, and you would ensure that as a spokesperson, you aligned with the decisions of the president, the positions of the president.
So before you went on TV, you would have an idea of what they were going to ask you just based off the news of the day or what was going on, and you would do a little research and figure out to make sure that you're speaking on behalf of the president?
Maybe it depends on the issue.
And then for the ones that you wanted the extra layer of visibility on, either through the White House counsel's office or the press office, did they confirm that you were speaking on behalf of the president?
Say that again?
So when you, on the Her report, and you said you would go up and say, these are my talking points that I'm going to go on MSNBC and say, and the White House, what would the White House counsel say in response?
Typically, that's not how that would work. Typically, I would just do an interview and I would not have talking points or something like formal like that I would want people to review before going. And I actually, I'll make it, this could also help maybe just generally understanding it. Karine or any White House press secretary, I think Caroline Leavitt does this as well. They have like a book, like a big book of talking points, materials, because I mean, they're having to answer questions about God knows any issue under the sun in a daily press briefing, and people would submit points. NSC may submit, their latest guidance on China, or and that would go into their book, and they would have, a large suite of talking points on any number of issues. I had a much more, I would say, limited portfolio of issues. So, and I was involved in, conversations about those issues on a daily basis, and I would be fairly infrequently out publicly, speaking in a high-profile manner on TV or whatever, than like the White House press secretary would. So that process was just different, and I didn't really utilize, a talking points development process on a day-to-day sort of level in the same way that like the White House press office would.
So let's take her report as an example. I'll get into more detail on her report, but specifically on when you would go out and speak about her report. Did you talk to the president about his view on her report prior to speaking publicly?
I did not.
Who did you speak to prior to speaking publicly about it?
I had meetings with the president's attorneys, senior advisors, people who had directly spoken to the president, about this throughout the process, especially his attorneys.
And they would tell you what the president's position is so that you could go and discuss the president's position publicly?
Generally speaking, yeah. I think maybe to help explain on Robert Hur as an example, that investigation had lasted more than a year before the report came out. And, during that process over the course of the year, the president's legal team and the special counsel's office, they're often going back and forth on issues that are being explored, developed, whatever, and they're having a back and forth about conversations. And I might keep up with that conversation as part of my duties and role there. So by the time the report came out, I kind of had a, general understanding of exactly how that entire investigation had played out, which, just like you guys, if you're working on a piece of legislation on the House side for a year in a committee, by the time the final product drops, you guys have knowledge of things within that piece of legislation. And so for me, it was at the end of that process, the report coming out, there was a lot of stuff that had been covered over the course of the previous year in the investigation back and forth, where the president's lawyers and the president had made decisions, that the lawyers had presented to the special counsel that I was familiar with. So I think I just want to make it clear that it wasn't like the report fell out of the sky and I had no idea about any of it. It was that over the course of that year, I was following the investigation, as part of my duties.
No, and I totally understand. I'm just trying to get a better grasp on understanding if you're speaking for the president, but don't actually know what the president's position is. How can you speak for the president? Like, you're going out and giving interviews saying you're speaking on behalf of the president, but you haven't spoken to the president about that issue. Sometimes you haven't even spoken to senior staff about that issue. How do you have a grasp of what the president's position is?
It was pretty infrequent that I would go out publicly to speak on behalf of the president without having at least some discussion with senior staff about the topics that may come up. And with regard to the president's decision-making, I didn't find that unusual at all. I would assume that, for example, if President Trump has a view or a decision about something and Susie Wiles conveys that to, members of his press or communications team, I don't think they have any reason to question that that's the president's view as well, in the same way that if Chairman Comer made a decision and his chief of staff communicated that downward to his press people, I think that's a pretty normal course of business when working for a principal or a public official.
So who would communicate the president's position to you?
It depends. I mean, to continue the example we're talking about with Special Counsel Hur, obviously the president's White House counsel or personal attorney would have conversations and meetings with the president about legal developments in that case and the decisions that the president made. And so, maybe an example, when the Justice Department searched the president's home for classified documents, obviously that was a decision that the president's personal attorney and counsel relayed to me that the president had made based on a conversation that they had had with the president to allow access to his home for federal agents. So that's the kind of like real world example of how that would work.
And I think on that example, you said that the Her report made inappropriate criticisms of the president's memory that were inaccurate, gratuitous, and wrong. Was that the president's position as well?
Yes.
Who communicated that position to you?
I mean, his attorneys who had reviewed the report with the president.
And the president had said this is gratuitous and wrong?
I'm not sure if he used those exact words.
But his attorneys told you to say gratuitous and wrong?
I'm not sure that they even told me words to use. I think that the president's general view was that the way that the special counsel had characterized these things in his report was inaccurate and did not comport with his experience. And I think that the legal team, by the time I had made public statements about that, the president's legal team had already written, and these letters are public, to the special counsel objecting to the inclusion of characterizations like that. And I was reflecting, the position of the president's lawyers, and my understanding was the president himself, about our view of that issue.
Do you know if the president approved those letters?
I don't have knowledge of that.
So when you went out to characterize the Her report as inaccurate, gratuitous, and wrong, you were trusting Mr. Bauer, Mr. Sauber, and Mr. Siskel to properly relay the president's position to you?
It was my understanding that that was the president's position, and that, yes, that they had relayed that to me. I would assume that the president's lawyers weren't making representations to the Justice Department that were out of line with the president's views on things.
But did they ever represent to you that that was the president's position, or did you just read the letters and then go make the statements?
It was generally well known that that was the president's view.
Did one of those three people tell you that I spoke to the president and he believes the report is gratuitous and wrong?
To the best of my recollection, the president's attorneys did reflect to me that the president thought this was super inappropriate and out of line. So, but it wasn't like, I think just because your question is, did someone explicitly tell you to go out and say that? That's not really how it worked. I'm just trying to explain that.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to understand if the sequence of events that these three people, in addition to others, were the most likely to then meet with the president regarding the Her report, and then they would come back and tell you the president said X. Is that what would happen, or would they just come back and say the report is gratuitous and inaccurate? Would they convey that it came from the president?
I don't recall in that specific instance, the president said X. I don't recall that being the way that worked.
Did they ever recount the president's position to you that explicitly?
They may have at times.
You don't recall an instance where they said this is the president's position?
Yeah, I do.
Which one?
I remember one of the president's attorneys, I think either the White House counsel or his personal attorney, saying that, the president thought that the special counsel was being a bulldog or something along those lines. That kind of thing.
Go ahead. Were you interviewed by special counsel Her?
No.
Were you kept apprised of who was being interviewed by the special counsel's office?
No, not really. I generally knew of a couple people, but I was not aware of every witness or person that the special counsel interviewed as part of their investigation.
Who were you aware of that they were interviewing?
If there were White House officials, for example, that had been interviewed, I may be made aware of that in case there was a media inquiry or it leaked that they were being interviewed and how to handle that, representing a White House staffer or something.
Were you involved in the president's interview with the special counsel?
I was not involved in preparing him for that interview at all.
You knew it was going to happen, though?
I did have awareness and knowledge that the interview was occurring.
Were you a part of any discussions regarding the scope or logistics of that interview?
No, I don't think so. I don't recall being part of any of that.
Did you attend the interview with the president?
I did not.
Were you involved, you said you weren't involved in the preparation, were you involved in any conversations regarding the substance of that interview prior to the interview taking place?
Not that I recall, no, to the best of my knowledge, I didn't really discuss the substance of the interview prior to the interview occurring.
What about after? When was the first discussion
Yes.
after?
I recall after the interview, some of my legal colleagues saying that they thought it went well.
Were there any kind of formal meetings regarding the interview?
That I was a part of, not that I can recall.
When, to your knowledge, when did the White House counsel get access to the transcript?
I don't recall when they would have formally received a transcript or had a transcript available to them. I did review the transcript after the interview happened.
Did you have any concerns about the transcript?
No, not really. I thought that it reflected sort of what I'd been told, that it went fine.
Can you expound a little bit on it went fine? Who told you that?
So the White House counsel, I remember conveying that it went fine.
At that point, did they express any concerns about his memory?
No, not that I can recall.
Were you able to review the audio in addition to the transcript?
I did not listen to the totality of the interview. I had heard certain sections of the audio.
Which sections?
I remember listening to the audio of the portion of the interview in which Bo's death came up.
Who brought up Bo's death?
The president was talking about that period of his life in response to a question about that period of his life from the special counsel and brought up Bo.
The special counsel didn't bring up Bo's death on his own?
I don't think so, but I don't recall specifically from that. I don't think so, though.
The president said the special counsel brought up Bo's death. Was he lying?
I don't have any reason to think he was lying about it.
Did he misremember who brought up Bo's death?
I can't speak to sort of why the president in a press conference answered a question or said something the way he said it.
Were you involved in preparing him for that press conference?
I did not meet with him or was not a part of his formal prep meeting for that press conference. It's possible I may have drafted some recommended talking point kind of Q&A material for it.
In any of the material you reviewed for that press conference, was Bo Biden in it?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
So the president brought up his son on his own at the press conference as well?
It's possible, yeah. I wasn't a part of the meeting with him immediately before he went out to answer questions and speak, so I'm not entirely sure kind of what the contours of those conversations with his other aides were.
Did you read the transcript portion regarding his son as well, in addition to listening to the audio?
I did.
I'm going to read you what the president said at that press conference. He said, I'm quoting, "How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself it wasn't any of their damn business." Did the special counsel ask him about Bo Biden's death?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay, so that statement is not true.
Can you repeat which statement?
How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself it wasn't any of their damn business.
Did you have a copy of the transcript? Maybe I'll look it up.
We can get one.
Yeah.
We can go off the record and grab one. Asking more generally about this, I asked it, I think, first, but at the press conference after her report was released, the president said something along the lines of, why did the special counsel ask about Bo? And you said that you had reviewed both the transcript and the audio of the special counsel's report, and the special counsel did not ask about Bo. Is that accurate?
It is my recollection that the special counsel did not ask President Biden, when did your son die? I think to respond to the general line, when the president said, how in the hell dare he raise that? And then he said, when I was asked a question, my understanding was that the president was upset that the special counsel report invoked Bo and Bo's death in any way, shape, or form. I think he was hurt by that and angry about it. So in the first part where he says how the hell he raised that or whatever the language was, I think my understanding is he was channeling sort of a frustration that he had about the report, but I don't recall the special counsel asking him a specific question about Bo's death.
What was your understanding based on?
What do you mean? Sorry.
You just described your understanding of Joe Biden's intention. What was your understanding based on?
Sure. Again, when the president's lawyers had, my understanding of this, when the president's lawyers, because I was not firsthand, I just want to be clear, when the president's lawyers had met with the president about the report, my understanding from them was that his reaction to hearing that was in there was that he was upset.
Do you recall any conversations prior to the issuance of the report while the office was reviewing it about the discussion of Bo Biden?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
The White House counsel's office got an opportunity to review the report prior to publication. Were there discussions amongst the staff regarding the mention of Bo Biden?
I think so. Again, it's been a while. I think that in the couple days leading up to the report coming out, I think that there was some discussion that they can't believe that he would mention Bo or something like that.
Do you recall why the special counsel mentioned that particular Q&A?
I don't recall specifically what the special counsel report said about it.
Was it that the president forgot when his son died?
It may have been. Again, I don't have the language of the report in front of me, but to the best of my recollection, he was using that as some sort of proof point about the characterizations he made about the president's memory overall. When I think subsequently when the transcript was released, the president says explicitly the day that Bo Biden died, and I believe there was some crosstalk about what year it was. And so I think that there was, my understanding from the president, and then certainly among aides, that there was a sense that was very inappropriate to sort of make a sweeping characterization based on that when, in fact, the president had said the exact date of Bo's death, which sort of contradicts that he has some sort of terrible memory and couldn't remember when his son died.
Your understanding from the president told you that he was upset about this?
Again, I did not talk directly with the president before the special counsel report came out, but that was my understanding from his lawyers who had met with him.
Yeah. So the staff relayed the president's position.
Well, again, I didn't think it was unusual because, again, it's like this is an individual who was the subject of a special counsel investigation. He would be meeting with his lawyers. A lot of times those are privileged conversations between a lawyer and a client. It's not unusual that I wouldn't have been a part of those conversations in the middle of a legal investigation.
Were there other instances in her report where the president forgot dates or times?
I'm sure there were. If I recall correctly, even at the beginning of the interview, I think the special counsel says something along the lines to the president of, please do your best to remember things. I know I'm asking you about things that happened a really long time ago. There seemed to be an understanding, and I think that's generally true. I think, you said that at the beginning of this interview to me, of trying to do my best to remember stuff when you're doing an interview. And so, I'm sure there were things that he couldn't remember or didn't remember in the same way that I'm sure there are things I don't remember.
Some of them were pretty big dates, like the day President Trump got elected. He said it was November of 2017. Do you recall seeing that?
I'm sure I did at the time.
Another one was, he said, in 2019, am I still vice president? Do you recall seeing that at the time?
I'm sure I had seen that at the time.
Did these kinds of lapses surprise you?
No.
Why not?
I didn't think it was unusual that when you're having a conversation with someone about stuff that happened, a decade ago, essentially, when asking about documents that have been taken, that you might mix up dates, times, years.
The interview was in 2023 and he mixed up the second presidential election before that. That's 5 years. Was that common? Did the president commonly mess up dates?
In my experience and from my interactions with him, I didn't see that very often. I mean, I'm aware, obviously, of media reports of him, mixing something up at a press conference or something like that.
You said you didn't see it very often. Did you see it sometimes?
In my own interaction with him, no, I never saw that.
President Biden also says in the transcript, well, if it was 2013, when did I stop being vice president? When did President Biden stop being vice president?
I believe it was January 2017.
So you remember that, but he couldn't remember when he was no longer living at the vice president's residence.
Is there a question?
Does that surprise you?
No, I mean, I think I was pretty clear about the contours of the interview and, talking about issues over the course of years and trying to get bearings within the confines of an interview. Are we talking about this time or that time? And, of course he misspoke or misremembered certain things through the course of that interview.
And then in the special counsel's report, you touched on it, but there's a number of instances where he discusses the president's memory in conjunction with the classified document investigation. You're aware of that?
Yes.
And this was one of the primary concerns that both you and the White House counsel and the president's personal attorney had with that report. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that it's fair to say that the characterizations about his memory were something that we found inappropriate in the report.
And there was a series of letter back and forth between the White House and the Department of Justice. You mentioned that, so you're aware of those letters.
Yes.
Were you involved in the drafting of any of those letters?
No.
Did you see any of those letters prior to them being issued?
Not that I recall, no.
Did you review her report prior to being issued?
No, I did not.
Talked about it a little bit, but you insinuated, so I'll ask directly. The White House counsel's office got a copy of the interview transcript prior to the report.
Yes, we had access to a transcript of the interview prior to the report.
Do you recall any conversations regarding the president's memory after reviewing that transcript?
No, I don't. I don't recall having any conversations after reading the transcript about his memory.
Did you have any what were the conversations regarding reading the transcript?
Maybe it's helpful to kind of talk about my access to that and what my role in the whole process was. So when I was reading the transcript, I think one of the things that I was doing was preparing for, in the eventuality that this transcript was public, what kind of media questions are we going to get? And what are the issues that we think people are going to focus on? What are things that we're going to have to, figure out how to answer in the same way that I think communications aides would work on any number of issues. And so in that process, there may have been some, different things in that interview that I would jot down as something that we might, get asked about and take it as my homework to figure out with the lawyers or whatever what the right way to answer, questions would be.
What struck you as something to jot down?
Well, that's a good question. There was obviously the primary focus of the investigation was how classified documents ended up at his house and at his personal office after his time as vice president. And there were portions of the interview where, he was trying to describe how the process of moving boxes or unpacking and packing his offices or things like that happened. And I knew we were going to have to answer questions about that because that was the underlying subject of the interview. So that comes to mind as something I definitely, flagged and wanted to prepare for.
Did you flag any of the memory lapses as something the press might ask questions about?
By the time I had reviewed it, I was aware that, some of the date stuff had gotten a little bit jumbled. So I may have flagged that as something to be ready for. You
said that by the time you reviewed it, you were already aware that the dates got jumbled. Who told you?
Because there was, I should also kind of explain. To the best of my recollection, it wasn't like right after the interview that I read the transcript. There had been a little while that went by. I don't recall exactly when I read the transcript, but during the course of that period, I think the lawyers had already been going back and forth, with the special counsel, and may have been mentioned to me by some legal colleagues that he may have messed up a year on something, or I can't recall exactly the contours of that.
Were they basing those comments to you based off already reading the transcript, to the best of your knowledge? Like, were you late in the game in reading the transcript? Had others already read it?
Certainly not many, there's not that many people, but a number of my White House counsel legal colleagues, the lawyers who were working on this matter, had read it, or in a couple of their cases been in the room for the interview well before I had read the transcript.
Do you recall any conversations about the date mix-ups prior to anyone receiving the transcript?
Not that I can recall.
And do you recall who brought to you the date mix-ups?
I don't recall who exactly.
Did they express any concerns about it?
I think in the process of preparing for the eventuality of this being public, it was mentioned that, if he got this year wrong or something, that could be something that people focus on. But it never really became a major focal point until it was in my legal colleagues had reviewed the report and knew that this was a major criticism of the special counsel. So it wasn't until that point that I really, felt like that was even going to, so to speak, be a thing.
Mm-hmm. You said that you didn't have a role in drafting the letters back and forth between.
No.
After the White House and personal lawyers were able to review the report, do you recall conversations about the special counsel's characterization of the president's memory?
Yes.
What were those?
I think, and I mentioned this just a minute ago in our conversation, the general view was that it was inappropriate that those would be included in a report that the special counsel knew was going to be made public. And I think there was, maybe belief that that was done intentionally, since the special counsel had made a decision that this was not a case that in any way was worth prosecuting or that they could bring, that to so-called, so to speak, to throw a bone to people who are going to be upset about that decision, especially in, comparison to the decisions that have been made about that then former President Trump, that maybe some of these characterizations had been made as a sort of, dog whistle, meat throwing exercise to appease critics. And so we certainly had conversations about that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the perception was that special counsel Hur was playing politics with the report a little bit?
I didn't want to, I'll speak to my views. My view is I couldn't state that with certainty. It seemed like certainly a possibility that this was sort of a way to put something in there that could, give critics a little bit of fodder.
Did anyone state that with certainty, that they believed the special counsel was playing politics?
I think that after the report came out, I believe that a lot of people publicly had stated that. Whether, I don't recall people in specific who had said that, but I know that had been a criticism.
What about prior to publication in these meetings? Did Mr. Sauber or Mr. Bauer or Mr. Siskel ever say this is politically motivated?
I don't know if that is the exact phrase or description that was used. I think, the conversation, and I mentioned this just a second ago, was that there was a view that this was sort of done to throw a bone to people who were going to be critical that he was not going to bring charges. So you can interpret that as being a political bone. You could throw that as being like just getting some people off his case. Like, I don't know, but whether someone used the term politically motivated in our previous conversations, I don't recall whether they did. It's possible.
The special counsel report found that President Biden willfully retained and disseminated classified information, but declined to prosecute him for a number of reasons. Do you agree with my summary?
I don't.
Why not?
I think I remember talking a lot about this when I was briefing reporters about that. It was a common misconception about the report that he had determined that the president had willfully maintained classified documents. I believe, if I recall correctly, and I'm happy to look at transcript or whatever of the report, I believe what he said is there is evidence of that, and then later in the report said the evidence was not conclusive or something along those lines. And I think that the phraseology just got sort of glommed upon and misinterpreted when the overall underlying charge that could be brought was the willful retention of classified documents, and then he did not bring charges of that, and in the report explained why and why the evidence did not support bringing those charges.
What was
If that helps explain.
What were some of the reasons to not bring the charges, to the best of your recollection?
I mean, my takeaway from the report at the time when I was there was that, they'd spent a year investigating every possible avenue of finding evidence of him willfully retaining classified documents, and they couldn't find any, or if they found nuggets, they couldn't corroborate them, and so then they made the decision not to charge him. And I think that ultimately that was the decision, because the decision is, is he violating a, criminal statute of willful retention of classified documents, and by not bringing a charge, you're kind of saying, this case is flimsy, we're not going to, it's not going to work. And then in specifics in the report, later in the report, he talks about they found the evidence lacking, or some phrase like that, I think, was in there at some place. And I mentioned this in my press briefing about this.
You spent a lot of time around lawyers, so I assume by osmosis learned some things. Is it possible to find someone committed a crime and still decline to prosecute?
I don't know.
You'd have to convict them in front of a jury. I believe the special counsel said that he would struggle to convict President Biden. Is that fair?
Say that again?
Eventually, if he brings charges, he would have to convict him in front of a jury. The special counsel said that it would be difficult to convict President Biden. Is that?
That's my recollection of what the report said, yeah.
Do you recall why it would be difficult to convict him?
Well, I think there was a whole report that outlined all the different things they explored and that outlined a number of reasons. I assume you're asking about some of the characterizations that we've talked about at length, and I think that was one of a number of things throughout the report that he mentions as informing his decision.
Yeah.
If you want to point to specific parts, I don't know if you have the report in front of you. I feel like this is becoming a
It would be
test
helpful
for Mr.
to
Sands
react
of a
to
report.
specific things.
We can go off the record. It's
Yeah.
400 pages long, so I'll introduce it to the record and I'll give you a copy and I'll 3. I'm going to introduce as Exhibit 3 the report produced by Special Counsel Robert Herr entitled Report of the Special Counsel on the Investigation into Unauthorized Removal, Retention, and Disclosure of Classified Documents Discovered at Locations including the Penn Biden Center and the Delaware private residence of President Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Thank you.
All right. So a kind of like blanket beginning question. I don't know if, again, in the osmosis of working in the White House counsel's office, you read the underlying statute that has it has a knowingly requirement that you have to knowingly and willfully possess or disseminate classified information. Are we operating on the same sheet of music on that?
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a lawyer.
Not a lawyer. Totally understand. So I want to go to page 6 on the report itself, not the special counsel's cover letter. And it's the second full paragraph. It starts, "We have also considered that." Do you see that?
Page 6?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So I'll read it. We have also considered that at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. That's obviously one of the lines that got a lot of press coverage after the report was released. Do you recall that coverage?
Yes, I do. And I think to the point that I was trying to make, and this is very, very helpful to have this in front of me, so I really do appreciate that, is the immediate prior paragraph says, in addition to this shortage of evidence, there are other innocent explanations for the documents that we cannot refute, and goes into that and spends a few pages before talking about it and then spends, or argue, hundreds of pages later talking about that, which gets into that it wasn't just that, it was that there was a shortage of evidence and other potential innocent explanations for how this happened, in addition to the sort of personal comments that we've talked about.
Did the White House counsel try to get special counsel Hur to remove or otherwise reword this sentence?
Which sentence? I'm sorry.
The one describing Mr. Biden as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
Based on my recollection, I think that was the subject of one of the letters that they sent to the special counsel.
Do you recall the justification for removing that sentence?
I don't recall specifically. I'd happily look at, if you have the letter that they sent, I'd look at it and can make a more informed response.
No. Do you recall the conversations surrounding that sentence? There was, obviously they sent a letter about it, but do you recall any internal conversations regarding it?
Yes.
First with who?
It was right before in the days before the report came out. Because maybe that would actually help, just if I may. I was not someone who had early access to the report, so I didn't know what was going to be in the report. I only became familiar with what may be in the report within, let's say, a couple of days before the report came out. And so I think that's important. And I remember in that period of time of just the last couple days before the report came out, where I was brought in to start some of the communications and press planning for what specifically we would get asked by reporters or have to deal with in the press. Sorry, I got distracted there. In that period of time, that sentence was something that we knew would be, politically explosive, something that was in here that was going to get a ton of press attention, that was going to become a political football, that kind of stuff.
Do you recall I already asked that. You mentioned that it would become kind of like a political football. Was that part of the justification to try to get that sentence removed? Again,
I don't recall the exact justification at the time from when the lawyers wrote to special counsel Hur objecting to that. After the report came out, a number, maybe 10, maybe a dozen, I don't know exactly, a number of former senior Justice Department officials talked about how that kind of a characterization or something like that was inappropriate to be in a report like this. People who have way more experience with stuff like this than I do had talked about how that was an inappropriate thing to include. It became sort of commonly known that was something that was inappropriate to be involved in a report like this.
One of those people being former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara.
That sounds familiar. I don't recall exactly what he said, but
did you have any conversations with him?
No.
I'm going to ask about two more specific lines in the report, and then I know the chairman has some questions. Flipping to 207.
Okay. Okay.
The very last paragraph, I'll read it into the record. Mr. Biden's memory also appeared to have significant limitations, both at the time he spoke to Zwanitzer in 2017, as evidenced by their recorded conversations, and today, as evidenced by his recorded interview with our office. Mr. Biden's recorded conversations with Zwanitzer from 2017 are often painfully slow with Mr. Biden struggling to remember events and straining at times to read and relay his own notebook entries. Do you recall any specific conversations regarding this paragraph?
Not that I can recall, no, of anything specific to that. It wouldn't surprise me if there had been some, but I can't recall any.
But kind of in the same bucket as the first one, that the White House counsel's office was objecting to the characterization of his memory as being important to the special counsel's decision.
Maybe just rereading that paragraph, it seems to be about. I don't know is the bottom line. I don't know if it was similar to that.
And then page 247.
Yep.
The very, very bottom, there's a sentence, the last line starts, "for these jurors." Do you see that? It's
247
yes, it's the very last line.
of I see. Sorry. Yes. Thank you.
So it goes on to 248, but I'll read it. "For these jurors, Mr. Biden's apparent lapses and failures in February and April 2017 will likely appear consistent with the diminished faculties and faulty memory he showed in Zwanitzer's interview recordings and in our interview of him. Therefore, we conclude that the evidence does not establish that Mr. Biden willfully disclosed national defense information to Zwanitzer." I mean, in this paragraph, the special counsel directly links Mr. Biden's diminished faculties and faulty memory with the decision to not prosecute him for willfully disclosing national defense information. Would you agree?
I'm not sure I would agree with that, just because that's the full conclusion of this entire section, and without reading all of it, I mean, I can look even before, there is also evidence that Mr. Biden took some steps to avoid sharing classified information. I'm not sure that that's exactly what that is intending to convey. I'm not the special counsel, he would have to answer that. But it seems more like that is one of many things that they considered as part of the decision.
Do you disagree with the special counsel's statement that it's consistent with the diminished faculties and faulty memory he showed in Zwanitzer's interview recordings and in our interview of him?
I don't,
I think he has a basis to.
I know he doesn't have a basis. He met the president 3 times.
No, I'm saying he doesn't have a basis because he doesn't have, he hasn't reviewed the evidence underlying.
He reviewed the tape and the transcript.
I'll say, I think that I can say that was something that we objected to, the characterization and the language that he used there, especially as someone who had reviewed the transcript, which obviously was public. It didn't seem like that sort of pejorative kind of description lined up with what had happened in the course of the interview to make such a sweeping sort of assessment. I think that was the view that I was representing as the spokesperson. That was the view of the president and his legal team, as we've talked about in the letters that they presented.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders, there was speculation that you were hired specifically to combat and answer questions or combat our investigation of the Biden influence peddling schemes. In other words, to focus solely on the oversight aspect of the Biden investigation. Is that a fair statement?
I was brought in to respond to the investigations from a communications and press perspective.
Was that the sole reason you were brought in, just to respond to the investigation? Because isn't it unusual to have 2 press secretaries, John Pierre as well as you?
It's not unusual that different press people or communications people would have different portfolios. For example, the National Security Council has a spokesperson that is, the lead sort of spokesperson for their issues. I was brought in as the lead press and communications person to handle oversight and investigations.
There was speculation that maybe Jean Pierre wasn't firm enough or whatever. Would that be a fair statement? So they brought you in to be a bulldog, so to speak.
I think I'm fairly nice. I don't think I'm a bulldog, but no, I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
I think that is not my sense of why that happened. In fact, when I started in the White House, Jen Psaki was still the White House press secretary, for example. So that wasn't an issue at the time.
Was Was Jean-Pierre upset? There was, I think, some speculation that she was upset when they brought you in, and she would have to, if they asked a question about the investigation, she would have to step back and let you answer the question. Did you ever sense any anger?
Absolutely not. Not from my perspective with her. We were friendly and got along well.
We have, I believe, Exhibit 3 or 4. Is it 4? It was a tweet, and it was something you repeatedly said throughout your opportunity behind the White House podium that we had no evidence in the investigation. Obviously, we were investigating money that the Biden family had taken in from foreign sources. And in the tweet, you specifically stated, and I quote, having repeatedly proven his lack of credibility, don't fall for James Comer stunts. I'm wondering, what stunts were you referring to?
I'm trying to sort of recall what this was about. And it may, I mean, in the memo, it's possible that it goes through that. That's screenshot there. It's a little fuzzy, so I can't.
Are you able to read the memo?
I can't see the memo itself. I can only really read the content of that tweet. I think I can answer the question generally. I think generally what I was communicating there was that throughout the course of the investigation, there were times where maybe there were overstatements about documents or witness testimony or things like that didn't back up, when the rubber met the road, what had been said.
Do you remember specifically an instance of that?
Well, it says in the first sentence there, what I was referring to here was the gentleman who I understand was subsequently indicted federally for lying about the Bidens had, if I recall correctly, had been the source of an interview with the FBI that was documented in a form that the FBI uses that I remember the committee was asking for.
He was indicted for lying about Joe Biden?
That's my understanding.
I'm curious, did you ever look at the evidence that we accumulated, the bank statements, the wire transfers, the emails between the bank examiners who, prior to filing the suspicious activity report, stated that this was an investment company with no investment, or in other words, a shell company. Did you ever look at those bank statements and wire transfers and read the final report from the Biden influence peddling investigation?
I certainly did, yeah.
So, do you still stand by the statement that there was no evidence that the Biden family was influence peddling, that that Hunter Biden took $5 million from China, even though Joe Biden said he didn't in the debate, that there was no money taken from China, that there was, and I'm not even talking about the energy company in Ukraine, because that was the most legitimate thing that Hunter Biden did. I'm talking about Burisma. I'm not even talking about Burisma. I'm talking about the wires that we identified from Romania, the wires from China, the wires from Russia, the gifts from, was it Kazakhstan? Did you look at that? I mean, because that's pretty hard evidence that the Bidens were, at least the president's son, was involved in a pretty concerning influence peddling scheme. And according to the Irish whistleblowers, they never paid taxes on it, which would suggest that they could owe at least $10 million in taxes. So I just wondered, I mean, you have a checking account, correct?
I do.
And you look at your bank statement each month and you can understand it. I'm curious, do you stand by, because there were a lot of, you did a lot of interviews and I did a lot of interviews, and I feel like we were, saying totally opposite things. And, you look at how this all ended. Were you surprised that Joe Biden pardoned his son?
I was surprised because he had previously stated he was not going to.
Were you surprised that Joe Biden pardoned his entire family?
I was surprised by that.
Would you admit that that's an admission of guilt, that Joe Biden pardoned his entire family? Because the only reason, the only time the spouses were ever mentioned in anything was in our investigation when we subpoenaed the bank records and we traced the money laundering, and it included, the spouses were involved in some of the pass-throughs. I mean, that's a pretty amazing thing. In Joe Biden's last act as president, right before the transfer of the power, all our phones started lighting up that he pardoned his entire family. And I just wonder if, at the end of this, the investigation's over, do you stand by the countless statements that you made that said there was no evidence of wrongdoing by the Biden family?
Respectfully, my job and role was to respond to the investigation, which became an impeachment investigation of the president, as obviously you know. And
it was an impeachment inquiry, but go ahead.
Sure. And my job was to respond to allegations that were made about the president, whether he had, been involved in something illegal, wrong, or whether he had had governing decisions that had been impacted by these sorts of things. And of course, over the course of that entire investigation, my view, the view of the president, the view of his team, my job as a spokesman to communicate it, was that none of this evidence amounted to what I think the end goal of the investigation, the official investigation, was to serve. I can't speak for Hunter Biden. I can't speak for the president's family members. Mm-hmm. Those were personal individuals who had their own representatives who we did refer questions and stuff to. And so, their own personal dealings is not something that was part of my job as a spokesman at the White House.
Did President Biden assure you that he never committed a crime? Do you recall ever having a conversation with President Biden where he assured you he never committed a crime?
I did not have a meeting with President Biden where that was said and that was discussed.
You mentioned that you spoke with Abby Lowell. Do you recall how many times you spoke with Abby Lowell?
To the best of my recollection, 2, 3, 4 times, maybe.
Was the Abby Lowell's law firm, were they sending you talking points as to how to combat some of the things that we would release?
No.
Okay.
And when there were allegations, I mentioned this earlier, when there were allegations that were just about Hunter and Hunter's activities, my job, I would refer those to Hunter and his personal representatives, because my job was about the president and his decisions and him individually, not his family members.
Oh.
One final question, and then we can go off there. Do you recall any conversations about Hunter being a legal liability to the president?
I don't recall conversations about Hunter being a legal liability for the president. Obviously, Hunter's legal issues, it's my understanding, weighed heavily on the president.
What about conversations about him being a political liability on the president?
I certainly can generally recall that at times there were conversations that some of these public visibility of Hunter, could be not great for the president, something like that.
Yeah, thank you. You can go off there.
Indicted on allegations he was an agent for China. I'd like to introduce as Exhibit C a Politico article from March 20th, 2024, titled House GOP's latest impeachment hearing devolves into bickering with Trump-aligned witness. The subtitle on this article is Tony Bobulinski repeatedly sparred with Democrats on the Oversight Committee and called President Joe Biden a quote serial bastard. And then I'm going to introduce as Exhibit D a screenshot of a tweet that I believe came from you, Mr. Sands, that states, reminder, last week Republicans hyped Tony Bobulinski as a quote star witness in their discredited impeachment. Comer insists he was quote credible, but the Daily Beast exposed his deep ties to a Russian oligarch, quote, who's been a close ally of Putin for decades. This is a retweet of an article in the Daily Beast titled GOP Star Witness and Hunter Biden Probe Has Ties to Russian Oligarch. Mr. Sands, I will represent to you that during their 15-month investigation into Hunter Biden and into Joe Biden's involvement in any of Hunter Biden's business dealings, or potential involvement, I should say, Oversight Committee Republicans heard more than 80 hours of testimony from nearly 20 witnesses and reviewed more than 100,000 pages of documents. Does that sound approximately correct to your recollection?
That does.
I will also represent to you that last Congress Chairman Comer made sweeping claims that Joe Biden had engaged in impeachable conduct while in office. Does that also sound generally correct to your recollection?
Yes.
Mr. Sands, did the House of Representatives vote to impeach President Joe Biden during the 118th Congress?
I don't believe so.
They did not, that's correct. Would you consider Chairman Comer's impeachment investigation a success, personally?
I think it's hard to characterize it that if it doesn't end in an impeachment.
I will say that many Republicans categorized it as a failure. I'm going to introduce as an exhibit E, I believe we're on, a Washington Examiner article titled "Republicans Exhausted with Comer's quote complete failure to deliver on promise to impeach Biden" report. I was wondering if you would be willing to read for me the last paragraph on the first page of this article, which continues briefly onto the second page.
Is this the source close?
No, it should start with James Comer continues.
It says, quote, James Comer continues to embarrass himself and House Republicans, end quote. A source close to GOP leadership told the Messenger, quote, he screws up over and over and over. I don't know how Republicans actually impeach the president based on his clueless investigation and lack of leadership, end quote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sands.
Thank you, Mr. Sam. The majority in your questions earlier repeatedly cited President Biden's, misremembering of days after a long interview, and like you said, Mike, from best of his recollection. Do you know who appointed Jay Powell as chair of the Federal Reserve?
I believe it was President Trump.
Yes, and so Mr. President Trump also did not remember that he appointed Jay Powell. He earlier this year said that he was surprised that Jay Powell had been appointed as Fed chair. Did you also know that President Trump once stated at a deposition that a woman named E.G. Carroll was his ex-wife, Marilyn Maples?
I did not know that.
And in 2019, President Trump also had a special counsel investigation into Russian interference with the 2016 election. And he said over 30 times that he did not remember to question the theory. So it seems that you would say that President Trump also has also an ability to remember certain things after.
Yeah. My sense is that it's fairly common for people who are being interviewed, if they can't remember something, to say they don't remember.
Mr. Sanders, just a few quick questions for you, following up on questions my majority colleague asked you about the chain of communication that preceded your issuance of public statements on behalf of President Biden. As I understood your testimony, it's not unusual for White House communication staff to issue public statements based on information provided by senior White House staff as opposed to the president directly. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And as a practical matter, you would expect any president to directly communicate messaging to their communication staff with respect to each and every communication that's issued by the White House. Is that fair?
I think that is fair, yes.
And to your understanding, does President Trump speak directly with his communication staff with respect to each and every public statement that they make on his behalf?
I don't have knowledge of how that operates, but that would be surprising.
Did you ever make a public statement on behalf of President Biden that you later discovered to be inconsistent with President Biden's actual position?
Not that I can recall, no.
Is that something that you were ever concerned about happening?
No.
Did anyone in the White House ever ask you to articulate a position or make a public statement that was inconsistent with President Biden's?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did anyone in the White House ever tell you not to worry about what the president's actual position was with respect to a given statement?
No.
Did anyone in the White House ever suggest to you that President Biden was unable to articulate a position with respect to a given statement?
My experience, no.
Going back to your earlier testimony, can you remind me again how many times you said you had interacted with the president?
A handful of times. I think I met with him 3 or 4 times
Got it.
during my time.
So if Chairman Comer went on the hall just now and said you testified you only met him twice, would Chairman Comer be misremembering something that happened 2 hours ago?
It is certainly true that I met with him more than twice.
Got it. Interesting. I guess I'm wondering sort of why you're here, and some of the majority's questions talked about, well, you weren't in the room, so how can you even know? So I guess I'm trying to understand why they brought you here. Do you think the reason that you were invited to testify is actually because you were so effective at undermining their impeachment inquiry?
I don't know. I'm happy to be here and explain my job and answer questions. I don't know. I'm not going to describe motive.
Got it. Did you ever call Chairman Comer a clown?
To my knowledge, no.
Do you remember Chairman Comer calling you a, quote, clown?
I do.
Did you ever insult the appearance of Chairman Comer?
I don't believe so, no.
Do you remember Chairman Comer saying he's not the most flattering person I've ever seen about you?
That sounds about right. I don't recall specifically what the example was, but I do know that he made some derogatory comments about me personally.
Personal derogatory comments?
Yeah.
Not about your work, but about you as an individual and as a person?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Were you the White House counsel?
No, I work for the White House counsel.
Thank you. And were you the president's personal lawyer?
No, I was not.
So would you have been in those direct negotiations with special counsel Turk?
No.
So would it make sense to ask you detailed legal questions about your interaction if you weren't part of the legal team going back and forth with special counsel Turk?
I'm happy to try to answer whatever questions I'm asked. I think I spoke clearly when I didn't have a legal role in the negotiations with the special counsel.
What was the final result of the impeachment inquiry?
My recollection is it just sort of fizzled out. I don't really know what the procedure is or whether they closed them or not, but I remember there being enough Republican opposition that it wasn't going to happen.
Do you remember a CNN article saying that Comer was, quote, ready to be done with the impeachment inquiry and House Republicans being increasingly frustrated as his investigation appeared to be at a dead end?
I generally recall that, yeah.
Got it. Do you remember a GOP lawmaker telling CNN, quote, Comer is hoping Jesus comes so he can get out, quote, he is fed up?
I don't recall that specific quote, but it would not surprise me if that was a quote.
Do you believe the questions that you've received today about the impeachment inquiry have anything at all to do about the fitness of Joe Biden to be president of the United States?
No, they certainly didn't seem to connect to that.
Got it. So do you believe this is more of a fishing expedition for a failed impeachment inquiry?
I don't know.
Did the question you received about the origin of COVID have anything to do with the health and fitness of President Biden?
No.
Do you think that is more likely a fishing inquiry for the Republicans' failed investigation into COVID?
I don't know.
Thank you. We can go off the record.
All good? All right, we can go on the record. Mr. Sams, we've been here since about 9 a.m. It's 11:47 right now. Did the ranking member ever show up today?
I don't believe so.
All right, thank you. Going back to her just really quick, do you recall anyone in the White House contacting Attorney General Garland regarding the special counsel report?
I recall a letter that was sent to the Attorney General from, I believe, the White House counsel and the President's personal attorney.
Do you recall?
After they had reviewed the report.
Do you recall any conversations beyond that, any direct conversations with the Attorney General?
No, I do not have any knowledge of that.
Were there any discussions regarding firing the Attorney General?
Not that I'm aware of.
During a press briefing in March of 24 after the report came out, I'll paraphrase, but you said in essence, there's no reason that anyone would need to see the audio tape. Do you recall saying something like that?
Is that in reference to her interview?
Yes.
I don't recall saying exactly that. It wouldn't surprise me, given the position that the transcript had been made public and the Attorney General's position on the audio release.
Do you recall any conversations in the White House regarding releasing the audio?
Yes, generally.
What were they?
Like, I remember when both media organizations and Congress had sought out the audio and just being a part of conversations about that happening. I remember some conversations, I don't remember exactly when or how, but about how the Attorney General had decided not to release it, and I knew that there was some sort of letter that he was sending to Congress, stuff like that.
Do you recall if the White House was involved at all in the decision to not release the audio?
I don't know specifically the degree to which, for example, the White House counsel would be involved in that decision with the Attorney General. I just don't know.
And then Ms. Dunn testified that one of the rationales for not having President Biden do an interview before the 2024 Super Bowl was the possibility of the Her report coming up. Were you a part of any of those conversations?
I certainly was not part of the decision-making about whether the president should do a Super Bowl interview.
Do you recall the concerns of the Her report coming up in that interview?
I have a vague recollection that it was mentioned that if the interview were to have happened, after the report comes out, he might have to answer questions about it. But that's generally about all I remember from that.
I have two or three more, and then Margaret has some questions. You were just asked about, you're not the White House counsel, you're not all these people. I think we understand that. I never said that you were the White House counsel today. All of these topics today, would Mr. Siskel have direct knowledge of it?
Can I just ask one clarifying question, all topics?
Like the Her report, President Biden's reaction to the Her report, review of the Her report, would Mr. Siskel have direct knowledge?
Of those things, I assume generally, yeah.
What about Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, I would assume generally, yeah.
What about Mr. Sauber?
I would assume generally as well, yes. They were the three primary lawyers who were handling this with the special counsel and with the president.
So those would be good witnesses for us to talk to because they would have primary knowledge?
I don't know. I mean, whether that would be a good witness for you or not, I don't know.
Do they have primary knowledge of these topics?
I would imagine that those gentlemen would have information about the legal process and decision-making.
I mean, they signed the letters. I'm assuming they knew what they signed.
I think that's a fair assumption.
Margaret?
You mentioned earlier that Ms. Jean-Pierre had a big book of talking points. What is your understanding of the process by which talking points made it into that binder?
Sure. I don't know exactly because I was not part of the press office team. Maybe it would be helpful for me to explain like my involvement in that, and then and it might answer the question. So if there was a development in my portfolio happening that is in the news in that day, I might write up a few recommended talking points on that issue, run it by the team that we've talked about previously, White House counsel, Ms. Dunn, for example, for them to look at, and then they would say, this looks good, and it would go into Kareem's binder as like stuff on my portfolio, recommended, answers. My understanding is that that's generally how it worked across departments, across portfolios, NSC spokespeople, who handle China, Russia, domestic policy spokespeople who handle climate or economy, they may work with counterparts in other offices and components around the White House to put together a set of recommended talking points and messaging that then would, through their own processes, go to Corinne for her binder.
And so the relevant leadership would approve what goes in and doesn't go in?
I think generally speaking, that's correct.
So for you, that was the White House counsel, Ms. Dunn, anyone else?
Those would be the primary.
And are those the same people that would be on the emails you mentioned earlier when you would send official statements to folks for approval before they went out?
Generally speaking, that's right.
Okay. Who else had the ability to put talking points into the binder?
My understanding is generally like the spokespeople and communications people from around the White House would develop those for their own portfolios for submission into her binder for the press briefings.
Do you have a sense of how often Ms. Corinne Jean-Pierre met with the president?
I don't have exact numbers. I know she traveled, for example, very frequently with the president.
What would your estimate be?
I really don't know, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I thought of a couple of follow-ups. You said that you met with the president a handful of times, 5-ish. We discussed 3. Do you have specific recollection of the other 2?
I recall one other, he called me to follow up on the first instance I mentioned to you, which was about Hunter's interview on the Hill and him asking what the media coverage was and what members are saying publicly. That meeting occurred earlier in the day, and then sometime in the evening, I received a phone call from the Oval, and it was him, and he asked if there had been, how did the interview end? I remember him asking, are they going to do a hearing? I said, I don't know, and I didn't think that the committee had made that decision yet or anything like that. So I definitely recall that phone call that day. I can't recall. There may have been, another meeting where I was asked to join for a briefing on what news coverage was on something.
But to the best of your recollection, 4 meetings, 2 were in person.
2 that were, the 2 that I described to you at the very onset in the Oval, one was a Zoom where he was at Camp David and I was a participant in the meeting. The phone call, I think there was another meeting, or another engagement, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to get an understanding. So the immunity decision was virtual with him at Camp David. There was a phone call regarding Hunter Biden's testimony.
Yes.
An in-person meeting regarding Hunter Biden's testimony. And one other in-person meeting?
About Special Counsel Hur's testimony.
About Special Counsel. So 2 in-person meetings.
Sure, at least that, yes.
Okay. These, if you weren't involved, please just tell me and I'll cross things off and we can move along. Were you involved at all in the president's decision to run for re-election in 2024?
No.
Were you a part of any conversations regarding the president's decision to run for re-election in 2024?
As part of my official duties, no. Obviously, once he had decided to run again, I talked about that with people personally, but I was not a part of any sort of official discussions of those things.
What about, were you involved at all in preparing the president for the June 27th, 2024 debate?
No.
Were you involved in any discussions regarding making the debate the earliest in presidential history? I
was not, no.
Were you at the debate site?
I was not.
Did you watch the debate?
I did.
Is the press reporting afterwards was that it was a bad debate. Do you agree?
Apologies. Yes, it was a bad debate.
In what made it a bad debate?
I thought the president's performance was very poor.
Anything stand out in particular?
I just think it was a bad debate. I mean, I thought he did poorly.
And in the 2 in-person meetings that you had with the president prior to this, did you ever see him behave like that?
I did not. That's part of why I was so surprised and thought it was so poor, was because it was not in alignment with my interactions that I had had with him.
And so just in your experience, the debate was kind of unique in that it was bad.
It certainly seemed aberrant from my personal experience with the president.
Did you have any conversations regarding the debate with White House staff afterwards?
I don't recall any specific. I'm sure I did. I'm sure that there was chatter about it being poor, but I don't. I mean, in specific conversations, I can't recall.
It was reported, and then Mr. Klain said that it might have been a different curse word, but along the same lines, that he said "we're fucked" after in the green room during the debate. Were there any sentiments like that expressed to you at the White House?
Certainly not that sentiment. I think that the general view was that it had been a very poor performance, and my personal view was that it was then on the president to go and show that it was aberrant from the norm.
Were you a part of any discussions about dropping out at that point?
No.
Were you a part of any discussions about dropping out ever?
No.
You said in your personal view, it was your view that the president should go out and show that that was a uniquely bad performance. Did you express that to anyone?
I can't recall like specific people who I expressed that to. I'm sure at the time, said he's going to have to go out and show that he's, that was unusual, that kind of a thing.
Did you think the reaction to the debate was kind of overblown? I mean, there were all these reports, all these members of Congress like running around, and emergency Senate meetings and all that stuff. Did you think that it was overblown?
No, I could certainly understand why people would react that way.
Did anyone express concerns about the president's ability to be president at that point to you?
No, not that I recall.
Within the White House counsel's office, did the debate performance renew concerns about the Her report being a problem?
Not to my knowledge. I don't recall that being a topic of conversation or focus right after the debate.
And then were you involved in any conversations regarding the president withdrawing from the race?
I was not part of the conversations about the president withdrawing, his decision about withdrawing, any of that.
How did you learn that the president was going to withdraw?
Tweet.
How did that make you feel?
I understood it. I mean, I think a lot of people found out that way.
Yeah. At that point, did you agree with the decision?
I mean, certainly it was the president's decision to make and had no reason to second guess it.
Sitting here today, do you think President Biden could still be president?
I have no reason to think he couldn't be. I haven't engaged with him, seen him since leaving the White House, so nobody can say for certain of anything, but I certainly have no reason to think he couldn't be.
After you joined Vice President Harris's campaign, did you have any conversations with her regarding President Biden's fitness to be president?
No.
Did you give her any advice on responding to questions regarding the president's age or fitness to be president?
No, I didn't.
All right, we can go off the record.